Hey there, folks, and happy February. As happy as it can be. Um, Things are very strange in the world right now, and particularly in the US. So it feels a little bit odd to just be doing like a Patreon as normal kind of a thing. But here we are, right? Life does continue, um, even if we change what we do in response to it. So, what's relevant about that? So, if you've read through the Journal of Threads, if you're part of the lover or higher tier, or if you've just bought the Journal of Threads separately from my website, the theme for February is invention, right? And that's not just productivity or creativity, but it's really that process of ideation and then like allowing that to be called into being, right? The actual basis for what the word means, right? That calling in, that kind of invocation. Um, but then to come upon or discover is actually what it means. Like I had a different idea of what it meant before I looked it up, even though I was very into Latin as a kid and almost went to school for it. But right, like that sort of that connection with the kind of like higher source that is your inspiration, whether that's a guide or muses or whatever, your sort of higher genius, the collective unconscious from which, as I mentioned in the journal, a lot of ideas stem. Right? Like that's kind of what I'm talking about this month with invention. Excuse me. And then the archetypes that we're going through, we just got out of the misunderstood and are going into the strategist, which is fitting for those of you who are part of the semester of divination or who signed up at the sage tier. Right, you have access to the workshop that we just had on Saturday on strategic forecasting. So now this week you get to practice and play with all of that. I did not intentionally time it; it just worked out that way based on what I thought people would want in February, and then what uh, the archetype that I was inspired to create from the minor arcana and the spaces in between them. Right, there are 72 of these archetypes, so not all of them are in every year. And then we move into the Promethean, which, as I was writing it, that was another one where I was like, oh, this is Protean. And I was like, no, that's a different thing altogether. And so the idea of the Promethean is really partly in contrast to the Epimethean, where Prometheus was I don't know if he was really a god or a demigod. He was a something, right? He's immortal. That's part of his punishment. But he had foresight, which is why he does what he does with the fire that he gifts to humans. But his brother, Epimethean, had hindsight. And so those two are really in contrast. So that's really where the Promethean comes into play, is the ability to sort of see the future and, in the case of Prometheus, follow it whether or not it's going to turn out well for you, because it's really important. And I am nervous to see how that plays out next week, to be quite frank with you. After that comes the stranger and then the martyr. This is more entering into the Pisces sort of 12th house aspect of the archetypes, where the stranger is very much tied to the Eight of Cups, and the martyr is sort of in the in between space before the Nine of Cups. Where the martyr has a sort of divine connection, right, and then they get rewarded for that, but not in this life. The stranger is sort of this fun area for play. It can be very dangerous, as is the case for real strangers, but it can be a really creative space, and I'll be interested to see how invention plays out in that week. So, as I'm thinking for my own self, I've been trying to be more creative, as I explained a few months ago. One of the reasons to do this Patreon was to have something more consistent, both in terms of what I could make from this work, to support this work, and then also what I want to deliver, so that I'm not like constantly thinking of like, oh, what should I be doing next? Like, no, there is a schedule of certain things that I need to deliver, and thankfully I am much more on schedule right now than I have. Well, I was last month too, but that's because I was on vacation. I've been able to sort of like find the balance this past month, so that's been good. Um, but one of the reasons why I wanted to do this Patreon is really tied to that creativity, right? That ability to create, to tap into more intentional spiritual work for myself, to help you all do that as well. But part of that for me that's been missing, as opposed to the like self reflective tarot teaching stuff that I have been doing, the parts that has been missing is the element of creativity, and not product creation, but just tapping into sort of downloads, releasing the sacral energy, whatever it is, right? And so I've been really trying to do much more of that this year so far. I've shared some of the like random sketches that I've been doing, and that's been fun. I'm finding time every couple of days to do more of that. And it's always a joy when I do. So it's sort of like mind boggling why I would not do that. But I am also taking time to like play video games, which I miss doing. And I miss the sort of like creativity that they inspire for me as, for those of you who know human design, a manifesting generator. Right? I like to sort of soak up lots of stimuli and then, churn it around in it, like synthesize it, create something new from it, as a kind of response mechanism. So, yeah, this month is really special for me, but this week I'm really thinking sort of about the strategy. Obviously, super busy with the start of the spring semester of divination. We've got creating an oracle tomorrow, Tuesday, and hard cards of tarot Thursday, um, and then office hours Friday, and then next week there'll be two more classes. And so we're like, obviously, that's a huge part of what I'm focused on that isn't my day job. Um, but also, I have this desire to be doing more creative stuff, and so figuring out like, okay, what is the story that I want to write, and I feel like I'm in the right place to do it. So I have this idea that I've sort of stumbled upon, a little backwardsy. It's very in line with a lot of the work and some of the creative work that I've done, but I never really thought about this genre for me because I don't think of myself as someone who likes or knows much about horror. But so I'm exploring what it would mean to write a suburban gothic. Um, it's very tied into shadow work, very sort of weird sci-fi, like light horror or more psychological horror, as opposed to like slasher stuff. Um, and so I'm really excited to play with that and see if it sticks, because a lot of the stuff that I've been trying, just not that I can't write it, it's not interesting enough for me to want to spend time to do it when I could be doing other things. And so this is something where I feel like, oh, I sort of like stumbled upon this a little bit backwards. For context, for anyone who cares who's in a similar situation, I decided to create a scene in my head and then figure out from there, like, what kind of story could I tell with this scene concept. Um, and that was an interesting process, as opposed to like top down trying to structure or saying like, oh, I really like this character, what would they be involved in, which is how I would normally go about something. um, Instead, like, oh, let me have this scene and then build from there, like not just one sort of character who could do anything, but a very intentional scene around that. We'll see if it works. I don't know if it will. But you know what? Experimentation is useful, and I do feel like I have a workable strategy for it if it does kind of take off. So this week, with the strategist at my back, is really about planning that out very intentionally. I'm also, of course, planning my exit from, I shouldn't say exit, my shift in Instagram strategy. Meta is just continuing to do sort of horrible things, and I don't really want to spend a ton of time on Instagram. I'd much rather use it as like a marketing platform to provide some, you know, useful stuff, but stuff that I can just repurpose and redirect people to spaces like here and my website. So I'll keep posting my new moon and full moon spreads because that is not new information. I will bring back my minor arcana explorations. I have to take photos of all the cards that I want to use since I used AI art originally to sort of get at concepts, and that feels really gross now. Um, and yeah, so I want to sort of redo that. But most of the content is ready, and that just those two things is going to end up being like 6 posts a month. And then I probably only want to do like 6 more, which will be based on blog posts. I recently shared the Justice Adjustment blog post. Glad to be getting back into that, learning to read the Major Arcana better. And then the I'll also have like deck interviews or book reviews. On Wednesday, I'm hoping to talk to Madame Pamita on her channel on Instagram about familiars for her book, The Witch's Familiar, or what is it called? The Witch's Guide to Animal Familiars, which I've read like half of at this point. It just came in over the weekend, and it's a very quick, straightforward read. Like it doesn't. It's very nicely written, so it's super accessible in that way. And yeah, I'm excited to talk to her about that. Hopefully, it works out. Last time we were supposed to meet, like it was during the LA fires, and she is in LA, and so yeah, that obviously was not great timing for her. Um, and hopefully, she's in a better situation. I mean, it's still pretty horrific what has happened in LA to all of those folks, but yeah. So lots of strategy this week with the start of the semester, with figuring out Instagram changes, social media changes. I'm debating whether I want to do like a mini YouTube series. But I really don't want to overpromise on that, and I feel like I have a ton of stuff that I need to sort of repackage and finalize. And then the creative part of the strategist to tap into that sort of channeled invention energy. Then comes Promethean, which I mentioned I'm a little bit scared about. Um, I don't know how that will work sort of creatively, which is, what I was starting to talk about, but it feels like having a very clear vision of how the future unfolds, um, and feels like a good time to be planning things. And then The Stranger is about getting a little bit weirder, so I'll be excited to start actually writing and trying to come up with some scenes in that week, even though it's a little bit earlier than I might normally. Lord only knows what the week of the martyr will bring. Probably I will be exhausted trying to get a bunch of stuff out and feeling like, you know, tapping into my martyr complex, as so many of us in the spiritual community have, even if we try to dial it back and remind ourselves like we are choosing to do this. No one is forcing us to do it, even if it feels like a calling. We could do other things with our skills and still be working in line with soul purpose and all of that good stuff. It doesn't have to be a constant sacrifice. So if you feel like it is, don't give in to that martyr complex, reassess, and all of that stuff. Um, yeah, I'm not going to go into the individual exercises other than you'll note in actually, I think it's the week of the strategist this week, that there are a bunch of links in the Journal of Threads, and then what you'll see in the daily guide. I don't know why. I was just like thinking about things when I was creating those that I felt like, oh, this needs a little bit more context for some people. So let me know if you think that's helpful. um, yeah, and I don't know why I didn't feel the need to do that in later weeks, because I do sort of map out the exercises week by week. Um, and so sometimes they like fall into different themes that way. Just seeing if there's anything else. There was something I was kind of excited to follow up on, but I did not make a note of it, so maybe I'll think about it when I post the daily guides when it becomes relevant. And until then, we will just all be in suspense, I guess. All right, I will talk to you later. Oh, I just noticed a color issue on Saturday, February 15th. But yes, other than that, I'm happy with the journal threads. Let me know what you think. Explorers who have been around for a while, you should be getting a new workbook probably by the end of the week. I don't know. I'm hoping to record the audio tomorrow night, but audio is so challenging sometimes where I live. Okay, talk to you all later.